Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Suzanne Kirch, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Well, hi, everyone. Today, my guest is my daughter, Suzanne Kirch, AI guru of Profit Minds, and my collaborator in artificial intelligence. And today, we're going to talk about getting your life back using AI. Welcome, Suzy.
Hi, happy to be here.
So, the way I start all of these is to tell me your story, but I mean, I know your story, but the listeners don't. So why don't you tell them how you got to where you are?
Yeah, so I have a background in math and physics. That's what my bachelor's is in. Ended up then getting a master's in mathematics at Boston University. And while I was in grad school, I kind of fell into AI. I was working for a small startup that works in AI and got thrown into the deep end with a whole bunch of AI research papers, and ended up on the patent team. So I have 5, now 6 pending patents in AI and different natural language processing tasks. And really, while I was working there for a few years, really just fell in love with kind of all of the nitty gritty details behind the scenes. Um, Learned that in addition to really enjoying math and all of the ways that you can apply math, which includes computer science theory, learned that I really enjoy linguistics and how can we pull language apart and smash it back together, and what can we get out of that. And so that kind of just led me to working more with AI and seeing what can we do with it as it currently is. What can we do with generative AI? And just, I'm thrilled that you actually approached me and asked me to work with you on this new AI venture that we're working on.
Yeah, I think the thing that struck me about this AI adventure that we're on in collaboration with a simple AI, was the completeness of the structure that we're building here, and the fact that you bring such a depth of technical knowledge to this to this endeavor that I think most people who are teaching, instructing, collaborating in the AI space, they don't really understand how it works. So talk a little bit about the way we're working with our clients, and how do you engage in that way?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the first pieces is you don't need to be super high tech. You don't need to be, an engineer with a PhD or whatever to understand AI. Generative AI at its core is predicting the next word. That's it. In terms of text-based generative AI, that's all it's doing. It's looking at what came before and it's predicting what's going to be next. And so one of the things that I try to do and we try to do is help people understand in a way that isn't really technical, right? You don't have to be a technical wizard. AI is for everyone. I firmly believe that. The benefits of using AI should be accessible to everyone. So really want to help our clients understand how to use AI in every way that they can and find those places of greater efficiency, and where can they use it to be more productive? What's a boring task that they never want to do but have to do on a regular basis because that's part of business? But how can we use AI to maybe make that go faster, right? We can use AI to do some of those financial spreadsheets that nobody wants to do. Well, maybe some people want to do, but not many people want to do. And so how can we leverage AI's capabilities to help us go through all of the data better, or at least faster than we could on our own. And so really working with them to look at all aspects of business, from the kind of regular employees through the C-suite, and letting and helping everyone leverage the AI technology.
Yeah, I think again, that's another piece that I really found appealing about this whole process. Is that there's an AI track, we call it AI Foundations, right? And that is the system for everybody, right? That everybody, no matter what their level in the company, whether they're a worker on the front lines, a manager, an executive, the executive's assistant, the CEO, everybody learns that whole system of how do you interact with AI, how do you use it to help you do a better job, how do you use it to solve problems, right? And then there's another track for the executives. How do you use it for strategic planning? So talk a little bit about the we have a belt system. Talk a little bit about the belts and how that works.
Yeah, so one of the things that I really like about the belt system is that it really builds on itself. One of the things that I love about mathematics is that it builds on itself. It creates this whole big picture thing. At
Because
least that I
you don't do algebra until you learn to count, or you learn to do
right,
addition,
right.
or
You need
right.
you need your basic counting so that you can then do arithmetic, so that you can then do algebra, so that you can then do, right? It always builds on what you've done previously, and when you get to the next step, you're not rewriting what you've already done, right? The rules of mathematics don't change because we're now multiplying instead of adding. The adding rules are the same, we're just increasing some pieces. And so this belt system works in a similar way where we start at the basics. We start at the fundamentals. You need to understand how to interact with your generative AI of choice. Now, we use ChatGPT, but there are any number of generative AI models that you can use. Another great thing about this is it's really platform agnostic. So if you have a generative AI that you love using, great, use that. But you start with, how do we interact with it, right? Everybody knows you can type in and get a text answer out. That's kind of the basic step that everyone goes with. But you can also type in some text and get out an image. You can get out code. You can get out a file. You can get it, there are actually 10 different input and output combinations. One of the ones that I feel like is least used is probably voice to voice or voice to text. And that's when you need to have an app on your phone, at least with ChatGPT, that's how that one works. You need to have the app to use it, and it's only on your phone. It's not actually on the web. However, you can then use, you're driving down the road and you have an idea. Please don't text and drive. That's a bad idea. But you can, you know, open the app when you're at a stoplight that's red. Please don't text and drive. Um, but you can then turn those moments that you're driving into, hey, I had this idea, and now you can voice interact, and it'll speak back to you. And then when you get to your home, your office, whatever, the transcript is there for you to use and reference. And this could be, I want to learn all of the 10 best ideas from this book by this author, or, any number of things. You have an idea or a problem that you're wanting to work through. You can ask it, help me figure out how to do this. So that's the very basic level, is the white belt, just learn the basics. From there, it's how do you use it to be more productive in your role. So it's, okay, what are my role responsibilities based on the industry that I'm in and my job title? And help me figure out what are creative ways that I can use ChatGPT to help me accomplish some of the deliverables that would be necessary for my job. And then we move on to problem solving. Help me figure out, I have this problem. Help me figure out what I can do. What's a possible solution, a possible direction that I can go. And once you have a solution, it can even help you create an action plan. One of my favorite things to do with ChatGPT is ask ChatGPT how to use ChatGPT, which is one of those really funny things. You think that something that meta would cause some sort of issue, but it really doesn't. It doesn't seem to have any issue referring to itself in the third person, and it doesn't seem to think it's weird. I just think it's really funny that that's something that it actually does really, really well. And so that's kind of the beginning steps of the program.
So you went through white and yellow and orange?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Orange is solving problems.
Yes. Orange is solving problems. And so then you get to green and blue, which is now we're building tools. So there is actually a way to build a tool within ChatGPT. So you don't always have to just like punch in every command. You don't have to type in every command all the time. And you can have it kind of prompt you through a process. And so, our special gift for the listeners will be actually a tool that I built to help with problem solving, to give you a little bit of a taste of some of this capability that you can, and really the power of it and helping you solve problems. But that's, some of the tools that we actually teach you how to build, helping you solve a problem, work through a process. And so that's the green belt, and then stringing some of these together is your blue belt. From there are 3 more. There are 8 in total. The purple belt is really, what's the future of your role? What does your role look like? How does it progress as AI changes? And then we get into brown and black, which are brown belt. You're looking at, let's look at AI agents. Let's build a process that uses an entire team, but now we can create an entire team of experts using AI that can give you a draft of, say, background research, right? So I want background research on some deep technical thing because I'm a nerd and that's what I enjoy. But I can have it go through the top research, some of the top research papers that have come out recently, and then also go through the patents, making sure that we have some sort of, legal engineering expert that will understand patents and how those are written, because it's its own thing to try to read those. And going through all of these different pieces, and even have a step in there where it reviews and confirms that all of this stuff is actual research that came out, right? We all know that generative AI can sometimes hallucinate and have some sort of understanding that something happened that never did. And so we want to, of course, make sure if we're asking for factual data, that it is in fact factual, right? So that's an idea of let's create a team that will do a project. And when all is said and done, you're working on your black belt. You're looking at building a model for business analysis. So now you're looking at a GPT that'll work on some business analysis model. I worked on SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Working on that kind of analysis for a company, and also helping figure out how can you mentor people and help them work through this process, since now you have an understanding of what it is yourself.
And the other thing that I really like about it is that, you do the training. It's about an hour worth of training on the white belt, and then you get some homework to demonstrate that you've actually learned, and you build something that's useful. You actually do something with it that has value to yourself, to your company. Same thing with the yellow belt. You build an SOP for yourself in your job and figure out how you can implement it. So each one of these belts, you have an hour worth of training thereabouts, and then some amount of homework. At the early belts, it's 15 or 20 minutes, and then later on, it's taking me an hour, right, to get through some of these things. So, yeah, I really appreciated that. That
Yeah, I
aspect.
mean, you don't seem to, or like people in general, there's not much care about an output if it has no meaning or context in what you do. So the problems that I'm going to work on are going to be different from problems that, say, a sales or marketing expert would work on, because we are working on different things. We're working on different problems. We're looking at different things, different aspects of business. So it wouldn't make sense for us to be looking at the same problems. You're using the same processes every time, but it's it's what is relevant to you in your job and your life, and that's one of the things that makes it so powerful, is that it's kind of this one process, this one framework that really can be applied across different teams, across different jobs, across different companies. But it works for everyone because it's what problems are you working on, and let's focus on that.
Yeah. No, it's so talk a little bit about, because you said, earlier we talked about, using AI to get your life back. So are there other than business applications
Oh
for
yeah.
AI?
Um, One of the things that I actually built recently is an AI that will a GPT that will help me come up with my packing list. I'm always forgetting things on my packing list. There's always something that gets left off. You try to go through top to bottom or bottom to top. I always start with my socks for whatever reason as I'm thinking through the things that I need to pack. But there's always things that get left off, you forget. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a GPT that could look up the weather, think through, okay, this is a business trip. I probably want, my nice pants and some nice shirts and maybe a jacket or two. It might be raining, right? It'll look up the weather for you and think through all of the things that you're going to need based on the kind of trip, the length of time, the weather, the location, all of that.
Do you have
Um,
access to a laundry? Do you?
yeah. If you're going to be gone 2 weeks and you don't have laundry access, you pack differently, right? Or you find a laundromat. But it's one of those things of, having having someone there to kind of help you do that check step of, have I thought through all of the pieces? Because also remember, AI is not, it doesn't spit it out and then never goes back to look at it again. You can ask it to redo it over and over and over again. You can say, oh, well, I have asthma and need to make sure that my inhaler makes it onto the list. And so it will spit out the list again, including now your inhaler, right? Um, if you say, my feet are always cold, I need to bring extra pairs of socks, or I need to make sure that I have slippers, or what have you, right? You know that you're going to be going hiking, make sure that I have my hiking boots, put those on the list. So it can redo the things that it's done and just do it again. And that's one of the really nice things is it doesn't get tired of doing it again. You can ask it to do the same thing over and over and over again. Um, but it will spit out something a little different based on the things that you ask for, the changes you ask it to make. Um, I in when I was looking at, a problem that I wanted to solve, I wanted to help clean up my office. So, right, that's something that not necessarily business related, but I need for my own life sanity, I want things a little bit cleaner. So I said, "Hey, can you help me figure out a method, a technique, a process?" And then once we went through, here's a solution, here's a place to start, it's then here's your action plan. And you can have it set up for, say you have 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. Great. Here's your setup with that in mind. Say you only want to work on it on the weekends. I want to spend 2 hours every weekend working on cleaning up my office and I want to be done in a month. Great. And so anytime that you have some sort of action plan, I always like getting action plans out of generative AI because the information's great, but what am I doing with this, right? Um, and so it's always adjustable. You can always say, "Hey, can we go back to 3 steps ago and rethink this piece because this doesn't seem right anymore." And so there are any number of different things. It's not just in your business. It's help me figure out how to balance my schedule, my kids' schedule, my partner's schedule. And oh, by the way, we have to drop the car off at the shop so that it can get an oil change, but now we only have one car and we have all of these things. Help me figure out how to manage that, right? You can ask it to do and help you do any number of different things, business related and just in your life, because it doesn't care the context. It sees the words and does the thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing that people need to, people talk a lot about prompt engineering, and I think that scares some people, but really, and I'm glad you used the word context, because that's what you're really doing here. When you're doing the prompt engineering, you want to make sure that the generative AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or the latest thing from Meta, right? Whatever it is, right? You want to make sure it understands the context.
Mhm.
What's really at issue here? And if it doesn't get it right the first time, well, you change the context a little bit. You add a little more context or a little more detail, a little more nuance, and then it will give you a different answer, or a different, I don't want to say answer. It'll give you a different potential solution.
Right. I mean, people think of prompt engineering as the job, right? Which is it's its own area of research. There's this whole big thing you can look up prompt engineering and it's very complex and they're looking at, we're trying to do this with this many and it does get very complex. But we're looking at a much simpler version. It's still a similar concept where it's the words that you give in your prompts dictate the answer you're going to get. I had mentioned a little bit ago that the entire premise of generative AI is predicting the next word. So if you change the words that you're giving it just a little bit, it's going to change how it answers because the context of what it's seen is different. And so that's one of those pieces that you learn the more you work with generative AI is you start to understand, okay, if I word this question this way, it has a better understanding of what I'm asking for. And so as part of the training, it's as much about learning how to interact with it just in general, and also learning how to interact with it better to get more of the kind of answer you're looking for. You start to get a feel for, here I need more information, more context. Here, maybe not so much, right? I want it to create a packing list and I can say, hey, create me a packing list for, I'm going this weekend to, I don't know, Chicago, right? And it'll create a packing list for you. Nice and simple. But if you're asking about something more specific, like, give me 12 role responsibilities for my job, you need to be a little bit more specific about, what's the industry, what's your job title, what kinds of things do you do, maybe what segment of the company you're in, what department you're in. Because role responsibilities is very generic. And so it needs more context and more understanding. Otherwise, you might be in research and they're like, hey, you need to do a sales or marketing platform. And like, that's not relevant at all. So you get a feel for where it needs more detail, where it needs, slightly different context, and where you can give it less information. And that's all part of the learning of using generative AI. And that's just what you do. It's not even something that I think people are really thinking about learning, because while you work with it, right, you have the class, the hour-long workshop, and then you're working on your homework, and the entire time you're interacting with it. And it's not like, "Oh, I need to think about how to interact with it better." You just learn over time, "This is how I need to phrase things. This is when I need to tell it exactly the kind of output I want," as opposed to, "It'll be fine just giving me a list, and I don't really care the format it's in."
And I think that's the other piece of it is that, and this is all done in English, right? This is plain, just spoken English. You just type it in, you write in the commands, if you will. There's no high-tech language, no special uh, uh, words or there's no special language associated with this. You just enter your thoughts and you get the response.
Yeah, it's very definitely different from learning, say, Python or C or Java or anything like that. You're not having to learn something really technical. You're not having to learn a new way of speaking. It's just a modification in, oh, I need to phrase it this way, otherwise it gets really confused. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it gets really confused anyway. Um, but right, that's all. It's gonna give you something different every time. That's one of those interesting things about generative AI. It's learning all the time, it's changing all the time, and so you might give it the same exact thing, and it might word it slightly differently, or it might, give you a different formatting. That's one of the things that is always a little weird is, how is it gonna format my answer this time? Um, but you're really not having to learn a new way of speaking, a new way of communicating. It's really just type in the words that you would speak to it. And that's one of the reasons that like voice to voice works so well. You're just talking to it.
So you alluded earlier to a special gift that we have for the listeners. You want to say a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so there's a GPT tool that I built that will start with asking you for a problem. What's a problem that you're working on? And it will, from that basic piece of information, will then ask you four clarifying questions to help kind of drill into what the problem is. What really is the heart of the problem. Because most people, when they say something like, oh, my problem is my office is a mess, that's not specific. That doesn't help us figure out a solution. So it's, is it the fact that you have a ton of tchotchkes? Is it the fact that you have a lot of documents everywhere, right? So it helps drill into what really is the heart of the problem. And then it comes up with 7 different solutions from books by experts, phrasing it all in terms of here's what I would do and why I would do it this way. So it's based on whatever information is from that book. And you can ask it for more solutions if you want, right? I said I want 7 solutions, but you can always, but when it asks if you're ready to move on, you can always say, hey, can you give me like 10 more, right? You can always ask it for more solutions and it will come up with more for you. And then after it gives you that set of solutions, it asks you to select some number of them. I suggest 1 or 2 is probably the right number to start with. And then it will help you create an action plan based on the amount of time that you have to execute this solution. And this is one of those places where sometimes it can help to be specific, and you may need to adjust how you phrase the amount of time. Sometimes it takes 60 days very literally. And so if you want 2 months, you're like, well, maybe what I need to ask for is 8 weeks working 5 days a week, right? That's one of those places where you may need to make adjustments in how you answer. But it will go through this whole process for you. And so you'll start with a problem, and at the end of it, you'll come up with a solution or solutions that will help you with that problem, or at least something that you can try, and also an action plan to actually work through and implement this solution. And so that's the GPT that we have as a link for all of you guys. And I really do hope that it helps.
Yeah, and the link will be in the show notes. It'll be profitminds.net/AI gift. So go there and we'll let you have a look at one of the tools that we built, and that something like what you can build if you take the training. So and Suzy, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Email is always great. It's Suzanne@profitminds.net. And that's really just a great way to start a conversation. I'd love to talk to you guys more about AI, if there are specific questions, specific uses, anything like that, questions that you have, things that I didn't cover that you're curious about. I'm always happy to have more conversations about AI and its uses, because I really do believe that everyone can use it, and it really can help people find maybe a little bit more order and a little bit more time in the chaos that is life.
And that concludes our show. Thanks again to my guest, Suzanne Kirch, the AI guru of Profit Minds. I hope you learned something about how to get your life back using AI. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.